Hello, I'm Alex Metricardi, Chief Marketing and Public Relations Officer for Living Branches, and today is Friday, March 12th. I'm here today with Ed Brubaker, our Living Branches President and CEO, for our next weekly video. Welcome.
Yes, it is a weekly video this time, although we don't always do that. But we have some things that are pretty significant, so we wanted to show. But we're also having our COVID t-shirts on again this week. I feel like I'm in Catholic school, right, where we have uniforms. You don't have to worry about what to wear on Friday. It's just the COVID t-shirt. Right?
Well, I don't know if you knew that last week that completely messed me up because I originally sent out in our email the video from the week before because we continue to wear the same clothes day after day after day. And I didn't notice it was the wrong one. So thank you to everyone who emailed me in to tell me that that was the incorrect video.
Oh, so it actually got posted. Oh, that's good.
So I'll have to pay attention this week.
Yeah.
Well, let's start just with a quick recap of where we are with COVID at Living Branches. And it will be quick because we do not have anyone on any campus right now who's testing positive. So great news.
Yeah, it's really excellent news. And we'll talk about a bit later, too, the impact of one person and what one person can have. But that is, maybe one piece of the great news that we have to share this week.
Well, and it is great news. We've had, it seems like, almost rapid fire updates coming out of CDC, CMS, Pennsylvania Department of Health with regard to who can do what, where, when. So let's talk a little bit about that. Which one shall we start with?
Well, let's start with visiting. Maybe we can do that. And the big story on Action News, as they say, was Wednesday evening. CMS came out with updates to their standards as to how you could do visiting in healthcare facilities. And it was an update. It was, as I call, the red letter edition, because it literally was in red, an update from guidance they had given in September. Now, many times, the State Department of Health will then issue their guidelines, and then even Montgomery County Department of Health or Health Department will issue theirs. In this particular case, I'm not sure if the state is going to update guidelines or not, except they said to our leading age PA state association, they said, you can go ahead with this. So we knew that we could move forward. The thing we then asked was, what about personal care? Because that's a separate regulatory body than healthcare. And the leading age PA told me that we could follow the CMS guidelines, but that DHS would come out with updated standards today or latest by Monday. But in the meantime, if we chose to follow CMS, we would not be cited as a deficiency. If we did follow them. So that was our marching orders as far as I was concerned. But I don't think we've seen anything that I've seen from DHS yet. And so we'll see if they're come out with theirs. But yeah, so basically it says you can have visits in healthcare, and we're extending that to personal care. It still says outside visits are preferred and they are safer. But either if they can't be done or for whatever reason, indoor visits are approved or okay to move forward with. So we recognize the risks involved, but we are so pleased to be at this place. And we'll talk about the details too.
Well, just when you were saying it was literally a red letter event, typically when they send these communications, they're quite long because they have detail after detail after detail of what you can't do or must do. This was relatively short. It basically just said visitors are, as you said, preferred and allowed, but there were I was really surprised at how short it was.
Well, the front end was short, Alex, but there were multiple paragraphs on the pages of the red letter edition that was in there. But yeah, but the challenge too is people might say, well, why weren't you ready? Well, we don't always know what they're going to say, so we have to react to what they're putting out there. So it's very good news. It doesn't mean it's going to happen today, but it does mean that it's going to be happening, and we are working as hard as we can to make it happen as soon as possible.
And I think we're very pleased because it is a simplified version of what we had been able to do with visiting before. We had spent a lot of time pulling together our guest program that we were piloting at the Willows and just getting ready to move to other campuses. We have visiting in common space. We have compassionate caregiver visiting, all of these things going on, and this is going to simplify all of that.
Yeah, and it's a good point too that we put a lot of time and energy, and I know you specifically and others as well, into that whole, as someone said, be our guest program, which I didn't know if we were at Disney World then or whatever, but yeah, there was a lot of work put into that, and it was nice to do for a couple weeks at the Willows, and we were ready to roll it out. And now that is really set aside. But, to be honest with you, that's been the story of our life this past year. You work at things, then they don't become valid or they have to be changed. And there's just been a lot of that. I would never call it wasted energy, but energy that you work on it because it's the best you know at that moment in time. Yep. And then you slide into something else that says, wow, we got to change course here. So if nothing else, we learned new muscles in that regard. During this past year.
Yeah. So by the time people are watching this video, we will have sent out communication. So they will have received information that in personal care on Monday the 15th, which is next Monday, we are reopening for visits. And we have committed that at the very latest, we will be reopening healthcare and memory care by Monday the 22nd, which is the following Monday. So maybe let's talk a little bit about why we're doing this in stages.
Yeah, that's right. And that would be a question. I'm sure people would say, well, it's okay. Why can't we do it like now? And I get that. But here's why. With personal care, other than personal care, memory care, and so we also differentiate healthcare and personal care memory are Monday the 22nd. But in traditional personal care, essentially everyone lives either with their spouse, and I don't know if we have any ones with sisters or whatever, but with their partner or loved one or whatever. So there's typically a maximum of 2 people that live in a personal care unit, and they are private accommodations. And they're larger typically than a healthcare room. And in some cases, they might be 2-room units. Yeah. So it's larger space, it's easier to manage. And we kind of said, we'd like to do this as soon as possible. Let's make it happen. So that was the reason in personal care, traditional personal care. The reason we felt we needed to wait longer, and it wasn't really the waiting, it was working through the details, is in healthcare and memory care, is not all of those units are private. So we have 2-person rooms in healthcare, and a lot of them, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In fact, that's part of our long-term plan to get out of that. But so we have all these 2-person accommodations, and then, it says you can visit, but you still have to wear a mask. There's still infection control precautions that we need to take place. So we need to make sure our entry kiosks are updated to make sure that they can screen people appropriately. But the bigger thing is there's also occupancy issues. You still have to maintain appropriately physical distance and those kind of things. And so you can't do that as well in healthcare. And so we're trying to figure out and work through, is it best that we let people just kind of self-monitor? Is there a way to have a relatively easy way to sign up or whatever? To say that it's opened up to visiting is wonderful news, but it's not as easy to just flip the switch and do it. And I think your comment to me yesterday or whenever it was where you were talking to a CNA, and when you kind of read in their eyes the duality of terror and excitement at the same time. And that's really what it comes down to. We've been in this a year, and it's a big deal. This is wonderful news, but it's also kind of like, whoa, where's this taking us? And so finding that balance is important. So we're saying at the latest by Monday the 22nd, but we just need some time to process this and get our processes in place. So, to the listening audience, I hope you will bear with us and understand where we're coming from. We are doing all we can, and our intent is absolutely to open it up as soon as possible. But the great news is personal care is Monday the 15th, and memory care and memory care, personal care and health care will be Monday the 22nd at the latest.
Yeah. You just talked about teaching us to flex new muscles during this pandemic, and this is absolutely evidence of that. I can't recall another time when we've said, well, we're going to do something by this date and we're going to figure out how we're doing it in the meantime. That's like just not how we operate. But this is so important, and we want families to be back together. So we are committing, we're going to figure this out.
That's right. And we also didn't want to just say, okay, come in one and all, and then it is chaos and creates ill will too. So there's trying to find that balance, thread the needle, etc. The other thing I would say too and comment on is there's other things that haven't changed. We have to wear PPE, the masking, proper hand hygiene, screening people at the front doors, all those kind of things. So there's certain infection control processes that the state still expects us to follow, and we would want to follow that. The other thing too is that one negative or one positive COVID case that had exposure to residents or other staff has the potential of closing down that level of care. And in fact, we're aware of a local facility. I'm aware of a local facility that they opened the other week for personal care visiting on a Monday. And this was pre, the stuff we're talking about, but other kinds of visits. Opened on a Monday. On Wednesday, an employee who unfortunately had not been vaccinated got COVID. And that unit shut down 2 days after they opened it. And as you can imagine, that's very upsetting. I'm also aware of another local facility that a person in environmental services, again, unfortunately wasn't vaccinated. And because of their exposure, that community chose to shut down the entire campus. And so that's the power of one, right? Wow. And so I just would also maybe put this out for visitors and families. Be aware, if you're not feeling well, please do not come in to visit your loved one. This is not the time to be spreading illness among our residents. Our residents have been out of contact with people. So it's COVID, but it's other kinds of colds and flus and things like that have been almost non-existent.
Yes.
And I know our infection control nurse was quite concerned, particularly about younger children who may not have their personal hygiene habits developed as well as some adults, not all. But that is another risk. It's not just a COVID risk, but it's flu outbreak, it's norovirus, it's all these kind of things. So we just got to be smart about this too. And if you're not feeling well, please do not come in, regardless of whether you're wearing a mask or not.
And to be clear, it's not just if one resident or one guest tests positive, that area closes down. If it's not just one resident or one staff, it's if a guest or a visitor who's been in that area tests positive, that also has the potential to shut that area down.
Yeah, has the potential. Now, again, you'd have to do contact tracing, how much out and about, and so it's not an absolute, but it absolutely can be a problem. And so it is exciting to be at this place, but it's also a little disconcerting too because of those realities, because it could be shut down in an instant. But that's not going to prevent us from doing this because it's the right thing to do. Absolutely, no question.
And I do think it's worth it to point out for our visitors who maybe haven't learned about this or been inundated with it as much as we have. So many times COVID starts like the cold, like a common cold. You think, I've got the sniffles. How many times in the last couple of months have we heard a case from one of our staff persons ended up being exposed to somebody at home and they didn't think anything of it because they just had the sniffles or a little sore throat, and that turned into COVID. So please, people need to not think that the symptoms are any different than what you might normally feel. So if you do not feel well at all, do not come to campus.
Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's talk for a second about residential living, perhaps, and some of the changes that we are making there. Yesterday was March 11th, which was 2 weeks after the second dose for most residents in residential living at Satterton Mennonite Homes. So they are now green and open for visitors, but we've even made some more enhancements since then.
Yeah, right. And the reality right now is, for most residential living residents, their life is not, and their restrictions are not that much different than a person of their age living out in the community. From a restriction standpoint, we don't have the same regulatory bodies. So we really do expect our residents to pay attention to the appropriate precautions that are out there, that have been out there. Don't do things that you shouldn't be doing. But that would apply to me too, right? Mm-hmm. So it's no different in that regard. The only difference on our campuses for residential living is those common spaces. I've said on this program many times that since the beginning of the pandemic, I have not been inside a restaurant other than to pick up my takeout. I've not eaten inside. However, I'm not sure when that may change. I'm fully vaccinated. Outside dining, I said I'd never eaten inside. I've eaten outside under a tent. But as these things progress, that will change too over the next months. But I use that just as an example. We're all doing those precautions. Now, granted, I know some people aren't as much, but I really do believe our residents have done a wonderful job with that.
Yep.
And so our residential living residents, it's continued to just be smart about it and do things that are smart and follow the rules. And yes, it might be a little bit different between neighbors, but overall. But the difference is in the common spaces. There's still different ways we do dining, and in the cafes and the bistros and the exercise rooms and all those kind of common spaces. That's where you'll still see some differences. But that's also true in some restaurants out there, some fitness centers out there, et cetera. But that's where the differences will be seen, as opposed to within what they can do within their unit and who they can have over.
Well, and again, by the time people are seeing this, they will have had our communication that talks about the fact that for vaccinated residents, starting Monday the 15th, we are going to allow them to dine together if they would like to, and to play table games together if they would like to. And this is the first step, I think, for us, that we really are differentiating what vaccinated persons can do versus what unvaccinated persons can do. And we've talked a little bit about the fact that in some way that feels, to me, a little bit unfair to the persons who are unvaccinated, but because we're so used to trying to treat everyone equally. But this is a situation where risk levels are completely different.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's in keeping too with things coming out of CDC, et cetera, that they're saying, hey, if you're vaccinated, you can see your grandchildren. But again, be masked, all those kind of things, do the appropriate precautions. But at those levels, they're also differentiating as well. And I think it's right. To me, it's the sane thing to do, so to speak. I mean, if you're going to a country where there's malaria, you need to get a malaria vaccine. And so, it's important. And people may feel it's unfair. I just kind of look at it, that's kind of life. We all make choices. And I realize some of them are based on medical issues, but for those people who are just like, I'm scared, or I don't trust, or this or that, work to do the research to get over that, because it's the way we get over this thing. And so we all have choices, but that doesn't mean there's not consequences to our choices.
And we are working for people who are maybe feeling more comfortable as time has gone on, and we've vaccinated, hundreds and hundreds of people here at Living Branches and have not seen negative effects. So for persons who are now saying, I would like to go ahead and get vaccinated, if you are a resident, we're working really hard to figure out how to help you do that now that our clinics are over, but we're not to that point yet.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we are, CPS, our pharmacy, is working at some things with us and other communities they work with. And so by mid-April, we hope to have some things worked out. So that's exciting news. So we have those things in place. And back to your comment, too, yes, we haven't seen any of that. Yes, some people didn't feel well and that kind of thing. We absolutely didn't have any major or serious side effects. But I can tell you this, Alex, we had major and severe side effects from COVID. We had people die from COVID. We had staff members' spouses die from COVID. We've had residents die. We have staff members who are what I would call the long haulers from COVID. So we've had results from COVID. So if you might think you're not going to get it, but I'd sure rather have a vaccine so I'm have a high chance of not getting it than taking my chances, is how I feel about it. And hopefully people can get more comfortable as this moves along.
It does seem like perhaps there's a bit of a change, just even in the news that you hear about people wanting to find the vaccine. I mean, those are the stories we hear now. People are out there saying, what do I have to do to get vaccinated?
Yeah, and there's great community efforts too. Like Ron Pharmacy had one in Harleysville this past Sunday where they took over the firehouse. And, there's just some great, Skip-Ack Pharmacy, they've done some great work in the community. There's just a lot of people that are really doing good work and saying, I'm doing this. I'm not making money off it, but I'm doing it selflessly because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's exciting to see. So final thoughts? I think we're there.
Yeah, I think we're there. I mean, I think the final thought again would be to reiterate, we are just so pleased to be at this place. And we want to continue to keep getting our vaccination rates up among staff. We're in a very good spot, I think. 74% or so, but we want to keep pushing that over 80. We want to make sure new staff members can get it. We want to make sure new residents can get it, because I really do believe getting those numbers up is what's going to allow us to stay open with visitors, to prevent outbreaks from happening again that we have to close down. So it just feels good to be at this place, and certainly a nice warm day like today makes you feel good too, with sunshine, et cetera. So we're feeling positive about where we're at and hope it continues.
Definitely. So, well, thank you all. Again, if you would like to check our updated guidance, you can always do so on our website at livingbranches.org/coronavirus. If you go to that page, there's lots of links there to our most updated pandemic guidance. And of course, you can send your questions via email to coronavirusquestions@livingbranches.org. Thank you.